Welcome to Your Asian Besties, a podcast where we reflect on our life experiences and what's helping us along the way. I'm Ray.
I'm Erin.
And I'm Leah.
Each episode, we talk about a topic, unscripted and unfiltered. Today, we're going to be talking about beauty standards and expectations. And I wanted to share something. According to DoSomething.org, which is, a global movement of young people volunteering for maybe over like 1,000 different campaigns since the 90s. Body image is how one perceives their body and assumes that others perceive them. Body image is often affected by family, friends, social pressure, and the media. And people who are unhappy with their bodies and don't seek healthy nutrition information may actually develop eating disorders or an unhealthy relationship with food. Approximately 91% of women are unhappy with their bodies, and only 5% of women naturally possess the body type often portrayed by Americans in the media. And also, 95% of people with eating disorders are between the ages of 12 and 25. So, I wanted to start off the question to you ladies. What messaging from society did you receive about what you were supposed to look like? And how did being Asian complicate or layer those expectations?
I think my first encounter was in elementary school, and I was always taller, I think, for being an Asian girl. And I had an expectation that Asian girls should be really tiny and really cute. And I think my mom was proud that I was tall, so she would always brag about my shoe size, but I would be really embarrassed. And I think I always thought as an Asian person I should be smaller for some reason.
Oh man, what about you, Leah?
So two things come to mind. I was just growing up, I can't say what age this started, but one of them, I think it's conflating both expectations, but of being Filipino. So my nose, one thing my mom would always joke around, say, is that I should pinch my nose so that I could have a bridge and to make my nose more pointy or Americanized. So that was something coveted, right? And having a flat nose was not that great. So why don't you pinch your nose and maybe you'll have a better nose was a thing. And I don't know, it was half joking, but I would actually do it. She would encourage me to do it. My nose isn't pointy. For those who can't see me, it's still flat.
You have a very cute nose.
Yeah, you do.
And the second thing was always to wear sunblock and stay out of the sun. Otherwise, I get too dark. And my sister is lighter than me, and she'd always get complimented with extended family at parties for having light skin. And you think just being Asian, you're already a woman of color or whatever. But being a very light-skinned Asian was definitely seen as more beautiful than being dark. So I remember that too, right? Fun times.
Oh my gosh. I totally remember the bridge thing. My whole family would pinch my nose.
Yes.
It was a group effort. But I think for me,
they really think that works. Obviously it's problematic, but what? Kind of dumb.
Yeah, right? As a little kid, you're oh, okay, this is something I need to do.
But, Marin, you mentioned shoe size and, the tallness. And Leah, you mentioned the nose and the color of your skin. And I think about, also my eyes, because I have a monolid. I don't have the double eyelid. And also, I know this is not related to exactly body image, but also Asian people are hairless, right? And they're not stinky. And I just remember being very hairy, and I'm actually a very stinky person. Like, I have a lot of body odor. It's always been like a source of shame for me. And I remember like the first time I met my biological father when I was an adult. Like, I swear, the first thing he said after like saying hello was, "I wish your eyes were bigger."
What?
And it starts so young, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we're talking about when we were kids.
Yep.
Very, very young.
What was I gonna say about that? Yeah, like I would get complimented. So my arms don't have any hair, and then people would always ask me like, "Do your legs also not have any hair?" I'm like, "No, like I have to shave," you know. Like, but they would always like, like that's kind of personal, but whatever, you know. Yeah.
I think it's so sad that we, like, as a society, I don't even understand. Like, okay, so when I was young, like, my family would do that to me, right? They would, like, give me these messages. But the undertone of that is I'm sharing these things with you so that you can either be aware of it and you know what your shortcomings are so you can make up for it in other ways, or actually try to improve the
Mm-hmm.
disadvantaged situation that you're in, right? And I know, like, in South Korea, at least, or even in like the Korean American community, like a lot of parents, as a graduation gift, or even before that, for their children, will get them the double eyelid surgery, which really is they
There's
just
surgery
put.
for that?
Yeah, exactly. They split your eyelid, like with a knife. They make a cut, so that it looks like you have a double eyelid. And I know I went to school with a lot of Korean people who would actually put tape on their eyelids, to make it look like they had a double eyelid. And so, there's like, it's really, really sad, that we do this to our young children. And I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, like, how did that, like, was there anything else that you guys remember that your family, or your community, like, said, either try to help you, or to try to, like, disempower you, or yeah, I'm curious about, or what you saw.
So many things. Like family parties would always be fodder for, well, definitely like in college, like, like the freshman 15. Yeah, they definitely let me
Mm.
know when I gained weight. Um, they, what was the other thing? I'm blanking on it now. Oh, but growing up, even like little, like at elementary school, like my mom and other aunties would like compliment my butt because apparently I had a big booty compared to the rest of me, which is also like weird. It's kind of like positive and also like, oh my gosh, like that's something I would not notice, as like a 10-year-old.
A 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Oh my
Well,
god.
that's what's weird, right? Like, it's kind of like objectifying or sexualizing like young girls, because that happened to me too. Definitely when I went through puberty, like I had uncles or old male friends that would be like, "Oh, you're curvy," or "You're,
Mm,
looking," and I was still a child.
yeah.
So that starts so early. It's like seeing yourself through the male gaze or seeing yourself just through other people's gazes. And that was a concept, I think it's called like the feminine mystique or something.
Mm-hmm.
We read it in college in sociology, just how young girls are split from themselves at such a young age because there's you, but then you're always self conscious thinking about how you're appearing to other people because of all of that objectification that happens. And I do want to make a note about the eyelid surgery. I know Ray and I think it was mentioned in the, what is that book? The
Minor feelings.
Minor Feelings, that surgery was actually created by a white Western doctor,
Oh.
to make the comfort women in Asia and Korea more palatable to American military. And I just wanted to point that out because so many of the things that Leah you're mentioning of like having the European nose or the colorism, having lighter complexion, it's all rooted in the
Yeah.
white, supremacy and racism. Um, so
Yeah.
there's that.
I know. Like, I love how you just dropped that. And I'm just like, it's so depressing because, like, how much of, like, what we are told as Asian women, that, like, how much conformity we have to do, and how much we have to erase of ourselves, to actually try and, meet those standards. And so I'm really curious, like, what kind of pressure did you feel to meet those standards and conform to those expectations that you received from, like your family and friends and society?
I mean, I think for me, it made me want to be appeasing so that I did not get that attention because that attention felt very uncomfortable to me from such a young age. And so you just start taking note of all the little critiques or comments, and you're like, okay, I need to be appeasing that so that nobody will comment on it because ideally that's what I would want.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But I think growing up in Los Angeles, I saw a lot of extreme behavior, like what Ray is talking about. A lot of my friends would tape their eyelids and all of that labor. I never did that. But I mean, that starts in middle school, and then in high school, you start seeing eating disorders, and you just start seeing already people getting plastic surgery growing up in LA. So it was kind of a blessing and a curse because I was around a lot of dysfunctional behavior, but then I also knew people in the entertainment industry. And so I think I always saw that it was a lot of artificial stuff. Like I knew that what you see on TV, what you see in magazines is not real. So that gave me a bit of freedom, but I mean, I definitely wasn't immune to it. And I think especially growing up in the 90s, I saw some clips of America's Top Model, and some of the plus size models back then were just like very thin women.
Jeez.
And so I do remember growing up during that time, like always thinking I was too big just because I had hips. And I remember certain brands like Abercrombie, like the pants like did have no give in the waist, like if you did have any curves. And so even when I was like really small, I always thought I was too big, right? That started from when I was a young girl and then throughout. Yeah.
I cannot. I remember Abercrombie, and there was so much that was problematic with that company, in my opinion. And then a lot of the stuff that we found out after the company, like, was in really deep waters. That's not the idiom, but anyway. How about you, Leah?
I definitely always remember wanting to keep covered to not attract any attention. Like I saw, like even like friends or other females like comfortable with their bodies, like even like strapless tank tops. I remember like one of my prom photos, like I'd have like like a long sleeve like sweater or whatever. Like I'd feel so uncomfortable with like just like bare arms. For that, like I don't want people commenting on me. Like I didn't want any of that attention, and I think part of it was like, yeah, like it influenced a lot of like how I picked what I wore, and things like that, right? It was a lot of overthinking, or like being very aware, right? Like what would draw attention and what wouldn't, and it's bad to draw that kind of attention. So then, like, yeah, like I don't know. Yeah, I want to be more stylish, like now I think about it, if I was like, I don't, but trying to like feel safe and not, like attract any of that attention. I guess even now, like I think about, like walking by myself somewhere, right? It's kind of like I'm always cognizant of like, I always want to be wearing jeans and wear a jacket everywhere. Probably because I'm always cold, but also because I'm like, I don't want to do anything that would draw that kind of attention. And in college, it didn't matter what you did. I think just because of your age, someone would comment, some construction worker or whatever, right? Like some rando on the street. Yeah. Ugh. I hate it. I hated it.
Yeah, that really is so uncomfortable. And I feel like I'm kind of on the opposite spectrum because, well, not opposite. Uh, but for me, like, so I know you guys are both talking about like covering up, and then also, Marin, you're talking about like how you always felt big. But you know, you were a model, right? Like, you actually, in many ways, like fit like that beauty standard. And I think, like I heard, like Leah, you were talking about how when you guys were dorming together, like all the boys had crushes on Marin, and
Yes, they
like
did.
they would, right? And so, like, Marin, you actually did fit that beauty standard in many ways, even though, like, internally, like, you struggled because you thought you were big. But also, Leah, like, you know, in my opinion, right? Like, you have the big eyes, you have like that beautiful, like, small face that every Korean girl wants, right? You have like that petite frame, and like, you know, you're pretty slim, you're pretty thin. And so I'm just kind of like looking at you both, and I'm like, I hate you both because I never fit that beauty standard. Like, I was always way too big. Like, I don't have a thigh gap, you know, like, and you know, like, sweat and no thigh gap does not go well together. I mean, TMI. And also, I wanted to say, like, was very, very self-conscious because I didn't fit that standard. And that I felt a lot of like inferiority, I guess, because I never received that kind of messaging that that even though you don't look exactly like what you're supposed to look like, that you are beautiful in your own way. Like, I never received that messaging. And I always felt shame to say that I have an eating disorder, because when you think of somebody with an eating disorder, they are skinny, they are bulimic, they're anorexic. But, you know, like, and so I was always even ashamed to admit that I had an eating disorder because I don't look like the person that typically would be considered having an eating disorder. And so, yeah. And so I just am like, I don't know if you guys want to talk a little bit about that experience of like meeting those beauty standards, and like maybe I think we talked about what are some things that you try to do, but is there any like crazy thing that you did try to do to, um, you know, meet those standards or like see other people do?
Well, I do just want to say that your comments like make me realize how crazy our beauty standards and culture is, because I always looked at you as being like a very pretty, cute girl, always. And you're talking about like the small face, like you have like the small face that,
What?
you know, I think Korean beauty standards are like
Ridiculous.
impossible. Obviously, like most Koreans do not even meet them. That's why there's so much plastic surgery involved.
That's true.
But that's the whole point of the beauty standards. Like it's never enough. So
Mm.
maybe you think you're good in this area, but there's always something. And the way that they pick apart women with all of these, like the terms like thigh gap or muffin top, or you hear all these different terms. So
Butterface.
no matter
Sorry.
what, yes, you could be a supermodel and you are probably self-conscious
Mm.
because there's something, you know? So I think that's the whole point of how we can all be made to feel like we're never enough, because it's like a, you know, hundreds of billion-dollar industry that is preying on the insecurities of young women, and there's always something. And so in college, I think I felt the most self-conscious during that time because, like I said, the attention did make me uncomfortable. I mean, I never resorted to anything very extreme. I think because I always would get lightheaded, so I'm like, I knew I couldn't have an eating disorder because I would pass out. Like, I'm the type of person that has to snack like I can't go a long time without water or snacks. Like I would just pass out. So I just knew I could never do that.
But wait,
Um,
yeah, but I was gonna
yeah.
say, but talk about the modeling thing. Like what motivated you to get into modeling?
I mean, I was scouted at the at school, like when we were on campus, and so I went through that. But I mean, I never thought of myself as being the ideal type because I was not tall enough. They're like, you're too
Mm-hmm.
short to do runway. You know, they're telling me, oh, you have a runway look, but you're too short. You know, so that's what I'm saying. Like anyone who is in entertainment or media, you're just like constantly nitpicked and rejected, no matter what. And so, I think like I would hear a lot of people say, "Oh, you look exotic." Like even other Asian people are like, "Oh, you're exotic." I'm like, "Okay." So, yeah, it definitely doesn't give you more confidence. If anything, it makes you feel like you're kind of fooling people. Like it creates this imposter syndrome of like, okay, this is a certain reputation or image that I have to uphold.
Mm.
And so I just felt like it was a lot of, yeah, self-consciousness and labor. Like I tried to have cute outfits and this and that, but I also never felt like I could be fully free to just be myself or my natural self.
Mm.
You know, like at that age, like we're all wearing makeup and stuff when we probably look perfectly fine without it, you know? So it actually wasn't until a sociology experiment
Mm.
that I did where they had us go a day without looking at a reflection.
I remember
And
that.
so I
Yes, in social psych. Yeah.
do you remember
I
that? Yeah, I
remember doing
love the
that. Yeah.
sociology. Yeah, so it would like challenge social norms. So that day I didn't put any makeup on or anything. And then I do remember that I was like driving or something and then these guys in a car where they were trying to hit on me and I felt invisible because I'm like, oh, I don't have my whole makeup or whatever. You know, I didn't think I like looked whatever. And then I'm like, who are they like trying to holler at, you know? But it felt better. Like as a woman, it doesn't feel good to have all that stuff on your face
Mm-hmm.
and then have your hair done a perfect way and then you feel like and you're wearing uncomfortable shoes. It feels like you can't just like be in the world. You just are like a little eye candy. Like I remember a lot of guys saying that to me like, "Oh, come over because we just need some eye candy." Like in
Ew.
hindsight, that stuff is all very
What?
sexist.
Wait, I'm sorry. Rewind. What?
Mhm.
Guys would tell you to come
Mhm.
over because they need eye candy. Okay, what is this?
So that's what I'm saying. You cannot win. Like, if you try to fulfill the expectations of the male gaze, then it's like you still then become powerless in that
Mm.
because that's all that people see in you. Do you know what I mean? So, it's very odd.
Well, person.
But I would say, yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't feel confident during that time. I felt very self
See,
conscious.
I was gonna say, like, I remember in college, I was like, you're the most authentic, confident person. Like, I felt like you had like the power, like you were in your power. So it blows my mind to think that you didn't. But
I finally owned my height at that time. I was
that
like,
must have
oh,
been
I
it.
love wearing those high heels and just be like, oh, all you short guys don't even try.
That must have been it. It was the heels.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh.
And you know, like, I remember when we were doing our Metastate movement, I remember like Mare and I was like looking for a partner who could like be the face, right? And I just like looking back and I'm just like, oh no, I committed the same thing. Like I was like
We need eye
using your
candy,
beauty.
Marion.
Yeah. We need eye candy. But also, like, to sort of balance that out, like, you're also incredibly intelligent, and the way that you formulate your questions and integrate what people say into follow up questions, and how you have a certain, like, power to that confidence that you exude when you speak. And so I do want to kind of caveat that it wasn't just your face that I was looking for, but it was all of your ability to like share your opinion in such a beautifully written way because you're an English major and you're always into humanities and you write really well. And so that was the other thing. But yeah, and so I'm a little embarrassed to share that. But I also remember during our recordings, like Marin would like, wear a little bit of makeup, and then after we would record, she'd be like, ugh. And she would just like wipe it all off her face.
I don't like it. I don't like the feel. I rarely wear it now. Like I never even wear it to our podcast recordings. But I think my saving grace was that my parents really didn't value that. I think it's like with my mom, she never pressured me in that way or commented about me in that way. Neither did my dad. And so I always got the message with them that my value was not based on my appearance, and that over time it's like your appearance should be like the least interesting thing about you. So I never really banked on that. Like it was fun when you're young to get some attention and whatever, but I always knew I was more than that. And I knew that it would never last because I watched Oprah, when I was really young. And she would do those interviews with those supermodels. And she like even told them like, I actually feel really bad for you. Like if you're only known for that, and then you have to go through the process of aging, and it's very temporary, So I am grateful for that. And I think I was just also never willing to labor that hard over beauty. I had my limits.
I have a confession. I wear makeup to all the podcasts, to all the Zoom meetings. And a lot of it is like I struggled with acne from like my teens until like my early 30s. Like it just runs in our family. Like my cousin had it too. I was like, when does it end? Like, why do I still have like adult acne? And like I've tried like Retin-A, like I've done so many different things, and finally like yeah, like I finally grew out of it. Yeah, and my cousin was like, yeah, like by the time you're 35. I'm like, oh my god. So yeah,
Oh
so like, and then like to have like dark skin too, then like it lasts like a long time. So like, yeah, like if I don't wear makeup, like I get very self conscious about just how uneven, like my coloring is and stuff, right? And I try not to make a big deal because I don't want my kids to care. But like for me, it's just I'm more comfortable like doing that, and it's like the bare minimum, like foundation, powder, and stuff. But yeah, even like in the pandemic, like I'm like, oh, like I have to be in a camera, like I'm gonna do it. So yeah, I think once again, right? I mean, that's like part standards, but part just like how I feel safer, I guess, or comfortable. Yeah, but that's been like I remember my biggest thing growing up, like seeing dermatologist after dermatologist, trying to figure out what I could eat, what's causing it, and I could never like find the root cause of it. Yeah. So.
Okay, so you used the word safe, and I want to unpack that a little bit, because I know that perfectionism comes from shame. I know we all read Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, and how she talks about perfectionism and how really it comes from not feeling safe to be who we naturally are. And so I'm curious for you guys, like, what is it that, makeup does for us, or that like that altering our appearance gives us the safety
To not be othered. I mean, like for me, it's like the less I stand out, the less attention. Once again, right? Like I don't want the attention. I don't want to feel different. I don't want to explain or feel like very self-conscious, right? And yeah, growing up, like hearing all these messages, like it's easy to feel self-conscious about things, and it's like, well, like I think for some things, right, you pick and choose your battles. Like for me, it was like I want to wear makeup and just feel okay like when I go out or whatever, like I don't want to think about what other people are thinking of me, right? Like even still to this day. And it's frustrating, but I'm like, but there's a lot of things I don't like really, I guess, care about anymore, like, but yeah, definitely like wearing makeup like it is one of those things I'm still like, yeah. I guess the other thing, getting a wax, upper lip wax. Yeah, I used to like go really regularly. Now on Zoom, it's just like I have to see people in person. I'm like, okay, like, is this a time like I want to go in? Yeah. So
That that was definitely something I could relate to. Like, I remember watching an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, and the Raymond's wife, she was like bleaching her upper lip, and I was like, "What is that about?" And I'd never seen that before, and the scene is actually really comedic, but that kind of made me think, "Oh my gosh, do I have to do that too?" And like, I have really dark hair, and I remember like it looked like I had a mustache. And so I was like, oh, I guess that's something that women do. So I'm going to go do it. And so for a really long time, I would bleach my upper lip. And it is actually really painful
I
when
can't
you're
imagine.
bleaching
Yeah.
your upper lip, you know, but
Yeah.
I can't, but also like the waxing is also really painful. But so for a long time, I would do that. And people would be like, do you have blonde hair? And so that was really embarrassing. But, you know, after like 10 plus years of bleaching my upper lip, I, it, I think my hair is afraid
Just
to
You
be,
killed it off.
it's
success.
afraid to
Just
be
kidding.
black. It's like, it's afraid to be like dark. And
It's
so
afraid to be black.
it is. And so actually when it grows out like kind of blondish. So like my thicker like upper lip hairs, they come out a little bit blonde. And
Well, if
so
that works, I should do that because I'm spending way too much money on waxing.
but it was very but then at some point it stopped growing as dark. And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, I will just stop bleaching. And I don't know. I think I make a conscious decision now
Mhm.
to not wear makeup. Because you know Michelle Phan, the makeup artist on YouTube, who essentially was like the first YouTube content creator, I think, in my opinion
Hmm.
at least.
Yeah.
She talked later in the years about body dysmorphia, right? Of how like looking at herself the way she actually looks, and then looking at herself when she's all made up, like made her feel really like strange about looking at herself without makeup. And I was like, that really hit home for me. And so like for my podcast homeroom, I make an I make a concerted effort like to actually show up in my pajamas and to like just have freshly washed hair and like no makeup, to be like, this is my home, this is my room, like this is my comfort zone. um, and so I really had to make like an effort to kind of overcome a lot of the things that I felt like I needed to change about myself. And so I'm curious, like, what you guys do now. I mean, it seems like there were mild cases, but is there anything you do now to, like, um, kind of reject those beauty standard expectations from society?
I did a lot of unlearning, and I have a pile of books here if anyone's interested. These are some of the things that helped me. Um, but there's a book called Beyond Beautiful by Anushka Reese. Like, these are awesome. I really highly recommend this one. And then this book, More Than a Body, by Lindsay and Lexi Kite, PhD. These are both amazing books. Like, I would give these to any young girls or women of any ages. Um, these two are also good in terms of giving the context, but there's a book called Fearing the Black Body. It's very academic, so I can just give you the TLDR on this one. And The Body is Not an Apology.
Mm.
So I think what I've seen is just how beauty standards shift over time. Like when we were growing up, the representation was not diverse at all. It would just be a skinny white person, right? That was kind of like our model. And then now we're growing up with like a little bit more diversity, I guess. There's more curves, all of that stuff. But I think for me, just understanding like the target moves at any time. And so it's a very subjective thing. There's a lot of capitalistic interest in it. And I've just learned to prioritize my own experience. And I definitely went through a phase of like body change. I was in a really bad car accident that limited my mobility. And then I was actually on the pill too. And I think those combination of things like led to me having like changes in my body. I felt like I had more curves and everything. So I took it upon myself to educate, and that really helped me to just let go of some of these ideas, because I think I did have some body privilege. I was one of those ones that kind of like wore the same size or was the same weight for many decades. And then when I had this change, it was like, and it was also before my wedding. So I felt a lot of pressure. Like, oh, should I go into the dieting thing? Like, should I go to extreme measures? But I'm like, I really don't feel like doing that. Like, I need to learn how to make peace with where I'm at and feel good in my own body. And part of that was like learning about the hormones, getting off the pills. So I think really just educating myself in how a lot of these standards are rooted in racism and sexism and trying to disempower women, right? It's all about being smaller than you are, depriving yourself. It's all about other people telling you what they think about you. And that starts at such a young age, as we've shown, like little girls being picked apart by grown adults. It's really messed up. So if anything, I've just tried to carry on that idea that like, yeah, the way you look, it should be the least interesting thing about you. There is no shame in wearing makeup or being into fashion and using that as a mode of expression if that's what you want to do. But you shouldn't feel pressured to do that for other people. It's really, I think as you get older, you start to learn that more. So I think that's kind of been my journey. But it's definitely been hard. And at times I felt guilty because I moved out of LA for a while. And then I think when I moved back, I moved to Austin, Texas, and it was less appearance focused there. And I felt more free there. It's like more of a natural kind of lifestyle. And then I remember moving back here and then going out again with girlfriends, and I really saw the dysfunction like coming back. And like when we go to happy hours, they'd be like, well, I can either drink or eat. Like I can't do both. Right. Oh, wow. I would see things like that. And then so, in my mind, I would start to feel like, am I not making enough sacrifices? Or, is everyone else like on these strict regimens, strict diets, like doing all these crazy things? But it's just not worth it to me. So
yeah,
at some point you have to just start living your life for you. And, especially with the process of aging, it's like if it just would be an uphill battle if you're still trying to look the same as you did in your teenage years. That's just simply not natural.
For sure. So. What about you, Leah?
Yeah.
I the exact question, but I
thought I had a lot to say.
What I thought about just based on what you said, Marion, like for the longest time, like I was like similar weight high school, gained weight in college, lost it after college, and kind of averaged out. And I remember like the months leading up to my wedding, my work had a Weight Watchers club. I was like, I'm 5 feet, and I was like 120 at the time. I was like, I want to lose like 10 pounds, like to 110, which is like still like normal. But I can tell you, every woman in that Weight Watchers club hated me. Like they like rolled my eyes because I would like be like, yeah, like I lost, X amount of pounds because I just had carrot sticks for a snack instead of, whatever. I'd be like, it's really easy, right? Oh, they hated me. But I was like the lowest, and I got the most compliments ever about my body. Like I said, like similar to you, Marion, like high school, college, like I didn't really care too much about my looks. Like I've always been more of like, it's about how smart I am, or, whatever. Like I work hard, and I didn't really pay attention. But yeah, I can tell you like around like when I got married, had like, yeah, like whatever the smallest size I've ever been. Yeah, so many people were like, "You look so good. Oh my gosh, da da," da, right? And of course, when you get pregnant and you have a baby, oh, I was the heaviest I've ever been, and I saved so many of my clothes that were like sizes, like zeros and twos, because I was like, "Oh, like it'll be easy to get back to that." And I started to, and then I got pregnant again the second time around. The weight stayed. Like it never, like I finally had to learn to let go of all those clothes and not base my like pride of being like so small. And even now, like as I'm getting older, it's getting harder and harder to lose that weight. And like I'm definitely not putting the effort either, right? But it used to be like I could intuitively just like eat whatever and like generally stay the same weight. But yeah, like whatever, maybe hormones or, like health stuff. Like I've had to like bump up my sizes and like I'm still like cognizant of that. I'm still saving some of my, like with smaller sizes. And I'm like, oh, like one day it would be such a waste. Like if I got rid of this, because then, I eventually plan to lose weight. Like it's in a whole thing. Like my closet's like a full range of sizes of things I can't fit into. And part of me is like still trying to hold on to, like, oh, like that's just something I have to work through, like I just need to dedicate myself to like whatever, like jogging or yoga again. But yeah, so it's not, like I don't know. I think it's still an ongoing thing.
Yeah,
You
it's
wonder, like,
definitely
isn't
an
the average
ongoing thing.
American like a size 14 or 16 or
Yeah.
something like that? Like,
But I don't
so it's like, who are they making these
not
tiny clothes
yeah.
for? Like, nobody. Like, it's really just a torture device
Oh my
for women.
gosh.
And like I said, it's like even when I was like a really like you're saying, like the smallest I was like a 4 or something, I still felt like I was too big then. So it just never changes. And I think what Ray was mentioning, I don't know that I had full on body dysmorphia, but I always remember like even my class photos, I would always think I looked terrible.
What?
Yeah.
It's like I wouldn't look, yeah, I wouldn't want to look at the photo, and I would tell my mom, like, don't even order those. It's a terrible photo.
Yeah.
And then I would look at them years later. I'm
Oh,
like,
it's a
that's a
cute
cute
photo.
photo.
Yeah.
But I had some type of weird, I don't know that any of us see ourselves clearly,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
you
I
know,
look back at high
because we're
school.
seeing
Yeah.
it through this distorted lens of all these weird comments that we've gotten throughout our lives, and we're just laser focusing on all these different things.
100%. And I wanted to say, like, so I've always been on the bigger side, right? Like, I am pretty chunky still. But I know, like, after I had my child, I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, that before I was pregnant, I had such self-consciousness about my body. Um, but then when I was pregnant, I was like, oh, I now have an excuse as to why I look this way. And then after like towards like maybe the third trimester, I started to be really proud of my body. I was finally like, my body is doing something for me that I never thought was possible. It's keeping two people alive. It's keeping us very healthy. My daughter is incredibly healthy. She eats so well. Maybe a little too well, but here, that's my internalized,
See?
like,
Yeah. Don't
right?
don't believe in those messages.
Exactly. It's so hard though, because it's so ingrained from you in your coding from when you're such a young age. And so after I gave birth, I just was so very proud of my body. And I had lost like actually a lot of weight because, during when you're breastfeeding, you actually lose a lot of your fat. And so I lost a lot of like my baby fat in certain more uncomfortable areas. But because I have some blood sugar dysfunction, I'm like gaining it back. And I have hypothyroidism. So it's like I constantly have to get the right dosage or else, it does lead to weight gain. And so I'm kind of going back into that and I'm just like fighting it every way. I'm just like, no, remember that pride that you had that you kept these two people alive while you were pregnant? like keep that instead of the societal messaging of, no, you need to change what you look like.
Question for you, because you mentioned earlier that you had an eating disorder, but we never really got deeper into it. So I want to ask, like, kind of how it started or what triggered it, and then how did you get out of it, right? Because I hear a lot of people just struggle with it forever, or, like there needs to be some kind of intervention in order for you to, you know, not have it anymore. So, yeah,
Yeah.
however,
That's
yeah, whatever much you feel comfortable sharing. But
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think I didn't know that it was an eating disorder, but it actually really started maybe more than a decade, like almost 20 years ago. Um, and like I'd always been like on sort of like elimination restriction type diets, saying, oh, I'm not going to eat this because it's bad for you. And then another season, I'd be like, oh, no, actually, that was bad. This is better. And so, I kept going through those fluctuations. But at some point, it started to ramp up. And it's not officially in like the DSM, but there's a subset of eating disorders called orthorexia, which is an extreme type of focus on eating healthy foods. And so, like, I was constantly doing like information gathering, right? Of like, okay, well, this group of scientists or this group of nutritionists or this group of doctors say that this is bad for you. These celebrity doctors say this, those doctors say that. This is what, this company is. So I was doing a lot of that kind of research, and it was taking up a lot of my free time. And even like it got worse when I became a mom because, my mother was so busy, she didn't really focus on like nutrition at all. And so I was like, I'm going to do right by my daughter. I'm going to make sure that she eats the right things so that she doesn't have any chronic inflammation in her body, and that she only eats the healthiest foods. She doesn't eat sugar ever, like refined sugars, no added sugars. And so, like, I was doing a lot of this stuff. But then recently, like Andrew Huberman on Huberman Lab, there's been a lot of like articles coming out about the insidious like messaging that he's spreading, and also like his flawed science, and like character assassinations too that are coming out. And that's when I was starting to realize, why haven't I been looking at all of this information with more of a critical eye? Why have I been just looking for the next like guru to tell me what to do? Why haven't I been? And I know, like, the world of science is also problematic because, or like the healthcare industry is problematic in that, they don't really give us a lot of control to take our bodies into our own hands or give us the control. And then also, there hasn't been a lot of studies on women. Like, women haven't really been included in a lot of clinical trials until like the past, couple of decades or last decade. I don't actually remember. And so that's when I really started to like wind down. And then when I went to like a bunch of doctors and I was telling them I need a nutrition plan, they realized that what they were actually dealing with was my orthorexia, my OCD. And so my therapist even told me, like, you have OCD, like, let's work on this. And so a variety of doctors who actually, were caring for me and were giving me this information. So I was like, maybe I should listen to these people, and get the help that I need. And just like we talked about in our therapy episode, like, to find somebody who you can relate to, or that you that actually cares about you or knows what you've been through. I started to look for somebody who can give me that nutrition information. And yeah, so short answer is I realized that the information that I was gathering, I wasn't giving it a critical examination. I mean, maybe too critical, but I was just inhaling the information without giving the trust to people that cared about me. And then I realized that, oh, this is an order. And once I started to name, okay, this is an OCD, that's when I realized, okay, I need to start working on this, not just for myself, but my daughter deserves better.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that question, and sorry for like the really long-winded answer.
Oh, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I will chime in and say you're definitely not alone, because I think I went through a period in my 20s when I was going more towards veganism and I cut out a lot of meat. And I didn't know the term orthorexia, but then when I look back on that period in my life, I would read every label and look at the sugar content, and I was moralizing food, like this is good, this is bad. I became very judgmental about what other people were doing as well, because it kind of makes you feel self-righteous, like I'm doing the right thing and this is healthy, and there's no end to it, because as you said, it's a full-on industry, just like the beauty industry is. And a lot of these wellness experts like aren't necessarily qualified to give nutrition advice. Many of them are just these kind of fad diets that are trying to sell you a product.
Right.
And I think, you know, the more I've educated myself from actual, especially women and women of color researchers in the space, you actually learn that a lot of these ideals, as you said about the, you know, like natural, like women meeting the body image, I almost think it's probably less than that, because like the idea is that you're like super petite and you have huge boobs and a big butt, and a lot of those are implants, you know. No, and even I think like the ideal of Barbie was based on a German sex doll. Most people don't know that. It was a bachelor party gift. Yeah, if you look it up, it looks just like Barbie. So that was, yeah, that's very problematic. And that's, if Barbie was a real person, that would not even be possible. Do you know what I mean? But the more that I've learned from some of these researchers, they actually say, because the BMI scale was based on white European men, it was actually a way for them to, it was like a kind of a strategy with the insurance companies to not cover health care for women and people of color, especially Black people at the time. So they built the the BMI scale, which did not include any women or any people of color. And it was a very small subset of like white men that they wanted to cover the insurance for. And so you learn these things and you're like, this is actually not at all related to health outcomes. It's actually a form of, you know, oppression, as we find in so many of our systems. And they even say, like, in terms of the BMI scale, that people that are actually classified as being overweight have some of the best health outcomes.
Oh, wow.
Right? So we see this problem because there are many women that have eating disorders, and one of the highest mortality rates is women with anorexia, because they're malnourished and they're not, you know, they're starving themselves. But they go to the doctor and they fit on the BMI scale and they're like, you're great, you're healthy. When actually internally they can be extremely unhealthy.
Right.
So this is the type of behavior that's very misleading, that I think we have to break the stereotypes of. And, you know, the little belly pooch that like every woman is ashamed of, that's actually a natural adaptive thing to actually protect your reproductive organs. Yeah. So that's something that I learned. So it's there for a reason, you know. And many of the like fitness influencers that you see with the six packs and everything else, many of them are actually very unhealthy, and they don't get their periods, and they've gone through like extreme unhealthy measures to achieve that image, not to mention all the body modification and the image distortions that they do on top of it. So I think this information is very important to share, especially with young women who are now seeing so many images on social media. And now with AI, right, you can't even imagine like what is actually real and what's fake. And so, one thing that I've personally done is to diversify my feed, into a range of different body types. And when I was outgrowing some of my old clothes, I started following like mid-size influencers and where do you shop and how can you still have fun with fashion. And this is very important to kind of see the reality of it and see what's out there. Because when we're all just comparing ourselves to a very unrealistic image, then it can lead to a lot of unhealthy behavior.
Yeah, and also, like I think I hear about like I heard about that like how uh having that like bit of fat to protect your reproductive organs, like having actually in that episode with Dr. Mary Claire Haver, she does talk about like that. Oh, maybe it's not her. Maybe it's somebody else. But how women actually naturally have more fat than men, and it really goes to around like the safety, right? Like because having enough food storage in a woman's body indicates signals safety and giving the woman the opportunity to, bring life to another child requires being safe, right? And so I think that there's so much there that I agree with you, Marin, that we should be sharing, with other people. And I was just wondering, like, if you could change the messaging that we do as a society give to young women, and especially young women of color, are I'm wondering, like, what kind of changes would you make? What are some things that you would do differently? What is the message that you wish that your younger self would have had?
Leah, do you want to
Oh,
start? I mean, you could talk about your daughter too, what you hope
yeah.
for.
Well, one thing I don't know the first time we heard it on the radio, but it's one of my daughter's favorite songs now. It's called Victoria's Secret by Jax. I don't know if you've heard of this song, but she basically it's a really empowering song like a lot of her songs are, but she talks or she sings about how the person who founded Victoria's Secret was this old man from Ohio, and it was like to make money off girls like me. And like my daughter just like sings it like out loud, like she knows all the words and she doesn't really grasp it yet. But I think it's like
Mm,
exposure to that, right? Like Maren, how you're talking about the Barbie and like the origins of that, or just like really like starting to question and like understand like like why are things the way we think of things, right? And then just conditioning my daughter to you're perfect the way you are, you're enough. And I try and find signs like to make sure like she's not getting messaging like about body and stuff, but I let her pick like what she wants to wear. Like I don't enforce any of that. Like you know I want her to like feel ownership of, does she want a haircut? If so, what kind of haircut does she want? So she gets to choose like if she wants her hair long or short. And I really try and encourage that. And she's even gotten to the point, like even earlier today, like I forgot I was asking her to do something, and sometimes she just goes like, "Mommy, you're not supposed to force me to do things. Like, do not force me." I was like, "Oh my god." I think I was just asking her like something like, can you like do this? I was like, okay, we need to have a talk. Like, yes, it's great that you have boundaries, and also you have to be respectful and all that stuff. So we're still working through that, right? But I think just letting her use her voice, but then being able to have a conversation about that and why, like, here's the situation where, that warrants that. Here's a situation like where it doesn't. I think it's, not perfect, but that's what I feel like I didn't have. Like, I think the
mm,
commentary I got on my own image and my own body was definitely unwarranted. Didn't want it. And then back then, as a little kid, like, I could never speak up, right? Like, that was a big no no. Like, to say, like, oh, I don't like when you do that. Like, I would get in trouble, like, that would be something that would warrant, um, like punishment, right? Like, no, I was to be, like told what to do and not speak back. And I think, yeah. So I think beyond that is just making sure my daughter has a voice, that she can use it, that she won't always get her way, but also like I'm interested in what she has to say, right?
Yeah, for sure. What about you, Maren?
Yeah. Yeah, I think having more of a survival guide, because the thing is, if like as parents or the people in your environment don't prepare you for that, then when you do inevitably get comments like that, you take them to heart. And so I think I see like a lot of progress with young people these days who, they don't give in to any of the gender normativity and the standards, and a lot of them do whatever they want. I feel like we grew up in a different time with this, gender was way more binary and the expectations were more narrow. But yeah, my hope would just be for, young girls, women, like, to have ownership over their own bodies and self sovereignty, and to be armed with that knowledge that because they still have to live in the world where there is a lot of sexism and objectification and even dangers, and for them to just be aware of that and to break free from trying to waste so much of your time and energy, especially when you're young, at trying to meet these standards. So I would just hope that they could get free from that earlier on and kind of decide for themselves, how they want to express themselves and how they want to show up in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Maren, you talked about one thing that really worked for you was that, your parents, right, didn't hold beauty as a value. And I feel like that's something that I'm trying to do as a parent is, to normalize what I look like. And like, if I do feel, but, it's hard because like I'm not wearing the makeup, I'm keeping my hair gray. Like it's so gray now. I'm keeping that intact. I'm not really shaving or I'm not like waxing anything. And like trying to show that I'm proud of the way that I appear. Um, I just need to stop making comments about how much my daughter is eating. But I think part of it is, again, that internalized whatever it is. So I do need to stop, and it's not okay, but I'm working on it. So, is there anything that you guys are taking away from our conversation, or one word, or one thing that you want to impart before we end our conversation here?
Well, I do just want to tell you, Ray, that I know you seem to have grown up with a certain image of yourself related to your body size and your appearance. And I just want to challenge you on that because, some of the ways that you were describing yourself as being really big, or I just don't see that. Like, that's so far from reality. And so I just wanted to point that out, that just because you have these concepts doesn't really mean that they're true. And I think, like, even as Asian women, we have certain privileges, because there's a whole spectrum of different body types. I think one thing that really helps me is I go to the Korean spa, and there's bodies of all ages and all different sizes. And it really, to me, like, challenges that idea, because I think I fall somewhere in the middle. But it's just like, yeah, being super skinny is not necessarily better or more appealing than having curves. You know what I mean? I mean, it's all cultural. And so in some cultures, like, having those curves is considered very beautiful. And so I think just learning to have that self acceptance around it and knowing that that's not your primary value. I think there's like a quote that says, like, being pretty is not the price that women should have to pay for living on this planet, you know? And I think as I get older, like, I really see more of the inner beauty. And I think because I have grown up around entertainment people and grown up in Los Angeles, that people like that maybe have that Instagram look or they have this certain attractive look, but they're very ugly people on the inside. And I've always seen that, like, so I just think like the inner beauty of your spirit, if you're a good person, you have a good heart, you care about people, like that is actually what makes you appealing and beautiful. So yeah, that's my takeaway.
Thanks, Marin. What about you, Leah?
Oh, I echo Marin with what she said about you, Ray. Like, I think it's that, right? It starts from us, like the self-talk, and it's hard to undo that. I admittedly struggle with that still sometimes, but I think it is just, taking the time, the space to, find those other things. I think I guess the way I look at it is, the more that you find, like, what, we've talked about this, what brings you joy, what lights you up, what motivates you, right? I think then you can start to see the world in a way where, beauty isn't the thing that, you need to, meet those standards for, right? Like you have, this inner self-worth, right? And that you remind yourself of that. And, I think it's always going to be a struggle with just how society is now to like combat that. But yeah, I don't know. If there's a way to just like tune it out and like, like mentally like turn down the volume on like all that other stuff, that would be great. But like hopefully things are changing now. Actually, the great thing now is that skinny jeans are out. Like more straight line jeans are back in, even looser baggy jeans.
I bought my first pair. You remember those cargo pants that we used to wear back in the day? Like Old Navy has this like nylon one, and it's the most comfortable thing ever. Like they're on sale right now. Right. I could send you the link. But they're like, they're not tight.
That's what I want. I need more pants just free flowing, like, I don't need them like all up on my legs anymore. Same with heels. I gave up heels a long time ago. Like, you know what? Like, comfy clothes, right? Like,
they're not
be
good
comfortable.
For you.
Yeah. So, and it's in style now. So.
Oh my gosh. I think, Leah, you were talking about like how, you're eliminating some of those smaller sizes in because it would be such a waste to let them go. And I'm just like, I can't eliminate my high heels. They're so pretty. They make me so happy.
When was the last time you wore them?
Way before pregnancy. Before pregnancy. But I know. But I'm just so sad. They're so pretty.
You can keep them. I have a pair of like Prada snakeskin gold heels that I will never wear again, but I'm holding on to them for nostalgia's sake.
Which is fine. Yeah, I think if you become a hoarder though, like I had like a ton in my closet. I'm like, I only rotated like, how many outfits. I'm like, I have a whole closet full of stuff. But keep the things that like are meaningful. Yeah. But bring you joy. Yeah. Marie Kondo your closet. That's what I need to do.
Especially if it's making you feel bad and you're thinking someday I need to be smaller to fit into this.
The pressure.
Like if things are not fitting or they just get rid of it, like I think.
Yeah. Lots of great reflections here. So if you haven't already, follow us at Your Asian Besties on social media and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
Oh my gosh, that was such a
I can tell we made you uncomfortable at the end.
I know.
Say something.
I'm sweating again.
You're talking about yourself. I'm like, who are you talking about?
Right, you didn't even give your like last piece of advice. So I was like, wait.